A young woman afraid of flying fell into the lap of a millionaire during turbulence. She only wanted to return to her seat after using the restroom, but a violent jolt changed the course of her life. Thrown off balance, she fell straight into the lap of a stranger in the first-class cabin. Emma Carter had never liked flying. She always felt those massive wings were far too fragile against the vast power of the sky. But today, on her flight from Sydney to Paris, things were worse than ever. Just an hour ago, the sky had been calm and blue. Now the hum of the engines was laced with the sharp whistle of wind outside, as if warning of an approaching storm. Her fingers tightened on the armrest, her palms damp with sweat. Before the turbulence began, Emma had only just left her seat to use the restroom, thinking she'd return in a minute. But as soon as she stepped out of that tiny cubicle, the entire cabin began to shake violently. A sudden lurch sent her off balance, her flat sliding on the carpeted aisle. It all happened too fast. She barely had time to register the sensation of being flung forward, gravity seeming to vanish. And then, she fell into a stranger's arms, not into a seat, not into the aisle, but into the lap of a man. Lucas Moreau, she would learn his name later, was seated in first class, utterly unprepared for her landing. His arms instinctively wrapped around her waist, holding her steady to keep her from hitting the floor. "Are you all right?" His voice was deep, carrying a distinct French cadence, just enough to cut through the rattling of the plane. Emma looked up. His eyes, stormy blue-gray, like the sea on a cloudy day, were fixed on her, filled with surprise and a hint of genuine concern. Her heart pounded harder, not just from the shock, but from that gaze. I think so," she stammered, bracing her hands against the seat to stand. But the plane lurched again, forcing her to clutch his shoulders. Lucas frowned slightly, keeping his hold firm. "Stay put. We'll wait until it settles down." She nodded faintly, catching the subtle scent of wood and a trace of bergamot clinging to him, a scent that made her head spin even more. The PA crackled. "Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We are passing through an area of rough weather." Lucas tilted his head slightly, still not letting go. "From Sydney?" Emma blinked, steadying her voice. "Yes, and you?" "From Melbourne, but I had a project there. Heading back to Paris now." He paused, a brief smile tugging at his lips. Didn't expect to have such an unexpected travel companion. Another strong jolt made Emma laugh softly, despite her lingering tension. "Sorry for such an ungraceful landing." "On the contrary," Lucas replied, his tone lightly teasing, but his eyes still warm. "This is the first time someone has literally fallen into my life." As the plane gradually steadied, no one seemed in a hurry to let Emma return to her seat. Lucas discreetly asked the flight attendant to bring her a glass of red wine. "I rarely drink on planes," Emma said, taking a small sip. "In fact, I rarely do things like the past 10 minutes. He raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Like falling into a stranger's lap, accepting wine from someone whose name I don't even know, and sitting in first class when my ticket is for economy." "Moreau," he replied. "Lucas Moreau. And I don't actually know your last name either." "Carter. Emma Carter," she smiled, feeling the wine begin to relax her. "What do you do for a living, Lucas Moreau?" He hesitated, then said, "Construction, mostly buildings." "And you?" "Translation," Emma answered, her eyes lighting up. "It must be wonderful to unlock the secrets of the past," he said softly, unconsciously leaning a little closer. Emma sensed the intimate tension filling the space between them. "Have you always wanted to build things?" Lucas smiled, but a flicker of sadness passed through his eyes. "Since I was a child. I suppose when certain things in life fall apart, you want to create something solid, lasting." Emma caught the fragility in his words, even though he hadn't intended to reveal it. "What kind of projects do you build?" "All kinds. Residential, commercial, even heritage restorations. But I have a special love for old structures. Classical architecture gives me peace." "Like old manuscripts for me," Emma replied softly. "There's beauty in things that have endured over time." Their eyes met and held, as if the rest of the plane had faded away. Lucas studied every feature of Emma's face. The tiny freckles scattered along the bridge of her nose, the way she gently bit her lower lip when deep in thought, or the sweep of her long lashes casting shadows on her cheeks whenever she glanced down. For her part, Emma was just as captivated. She had never seen eyes as expressive as Lucas's. They held intelligence, but also a deep sadness he tried to hide. His hands, she had noticed them the moment he caught her, were both strong and gentle, with calluses that proved he didn't just give orders from an office but worked directly with his own hands. "How long will you be in Paris?" Lucas asked, trying to sound casual, though her answer suddenly felt important to him. "6 months," Emma replied. "The exhibition opens in September, but there's a lot to prepare." "And you? Do you live here?" "All my life," he nodded. The captain's voice came over the speakers, announcing that the turbulence had passed and passengers were free to move around. Emma glanced toward the aisle, then back at Lucas, feeling hesitant. "I suppose I should go back to my seat," she said without much conviction. "Probably," he replied, yet both of them remained where they were. A flight attendant arrived, politely inviting her to return to the economy cabin. Emma rose slowly, thanked Lucas, and extended her hand. He stood as well, taking her hand, as if about to say something important. But in the end, he only murmured, "Have a good flight, Emma Carter." "You too, Lucas Moreau." 2 weeks had passed since that turbulent flight. Emma Carter had begun to settle into the quiet rhythm of Paris. Morning walks past the corner cafe, where the scent of fresh croissants felt like a daily welcome, and long, absorbed hours in the hushed halls of the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, where her fingers danced over centuries-old words. Her work there absorbed her so completely, she often lost track of time. The exhibition Les Voix du Siècle d'Or, Voices of the Golden Century, was a rare treasure, showcasing manuscripts from the archives, and Emma was one of the translation specialists preparing bilingual guides and captions. That morning, she was bent over a 17th-century French play, scribbling notes, when the voice of the library director sounded behind her. "Emma, I'd like to introduce you to a special guest." She looked up, and her eyes froze. Lucas Moreau stood there, tall and composed in a charcoal suit, the light from the windows catching in the blue-gray eyes she remembered so well. He was speaking to the director, but when their gazes met, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. "We've met before," Lucas said, a hint of a smile playing at the corner of his lips. Emma kept her tone steady. "Yes, on the flight from Sydney." "A rather unforgettable meeting," he replied, his voice laced with understated humor. The director smiled, clearly pleased. "Lucas is a major sponsor of our exhibition. He'd like to see some of the highlights. I can't think of anyone better than you to show him." Emma hesitated briefly, then nodded. "All right, follow me." They walked slowly through the quiet corridors of the library, where soft golden light fell over glass cases holding centuries-old works. Emma began explaining the origins, authors, and historical context of each piece. Lucas listened intently, occasionally asking thoughtful questions that surprised her. Stopping before a love poem by Pierre de Ronsard, Lucas leaned in to read the delicate, slanted script. He writes about love as if it's something fragile he's about to lose. Emma looked up, meeting his gaze. "You read Old French?" "Just a little," he admitted, "but some feelings don't need translation." The words sent a faint tremor through her chest. When the tour ended, Lucas stood by the exit, hands in his pockets, his gaze still locked on hers. "This evening, are you busy?" Emma blinked. "You mean dinner? No turbulence, no seatbelts, just two people talking." Part of her wanted to refuse, to keep a safe distance. But another part, drawn in by that gaze, whispered yes. She felt something warm and dangerous unfurl inside her chest. "All right," she said, not realizing she was smiling, or how much she was already looking forward to it. That evening, Lucas chose a small restaurant tucked away on a quiet street near the Seine. It wasn't the glamorous kind splashed across magazine pages, but a warm, intimate place with golden lighting, small wooden tables, and the scent of freshly baked bread mingling with red wine. Emma arrived a little early. She chose a table by the window from which she could see the river reflecting the city lights. When Lucas walked in, a long black coat draped over his shoulders, she realized he carried not just elegance, but a kind of steady energy that seemed to slow the air around him. "Thank you for coming," he said, pulling out her chair. They ordered simple dishes, fresh salad, grilled salmon, and a bottle of Bordeaux. "Do you come here often?" Emma asked, a little shy in her simple office dress. First time? Lucas poured red wine into a crystal glass. But I wanted our first dinner to be special. Our first dinner? She raised an eyebrow. I've already planned the second, third, fourth. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. I have high hopes. Throughout the meal, Emma discovered sides of Lucas she hadn't expected. He was well-read, having devoured countless books, and owned a collection of first editions of Spanish poetry that astonished her. He was also funny, telling stories from business trips that made her laugh until her cheeks ached. And what about your family? She asked as they shared the chocolate dessert he had insisted she try. Do you have any siblings? A shadow passed over Lucas's eyes. A younger brother, Lucas, who lives in London. We're very close now, but it wasn't always that way. Why not? After my mother left, we each retreated into our own worlds. She froze. She left? When I was 8 and my brother 6, my mother left a note saying she couldn't go on being a mother, that she needed to find herself. We never saw her again. Oh my God, Lucas, Emma said softly, her heart aching for the boy he once was. My father did his best, he continued, gazing out at the rain. But he was a businessman. He didn't know how to care for 2 broken children. My brother became rebellious, and I became controlling. I suppose I decided that if I could control everything around me, nothing could ever hurt me like that again. Emma reached out and placed her hand over his. The touch was both electric and warm. And now, do you still feel the need to control everything? Lucas looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her. If you'd asked me a few weeks ago, I'd have said yes. But lately, he paused, a rare, fragile smile appearing. I've realized there are beautiful things that only happen when you let fate take the lead. The air between them grew more intense. Like what? She asked. Like a beautiful woman falling into my lap during airplane turbulence, he replied softly, turning her hand to lace their fingers together. Like discovering that woman works in a field I help sponsor. Like looking forward to every chance to see her again. Emma's heart pounded dangerously. Emma, I know this is moving fast, he continued, lifting their entwined hands and pressing a light kiss to her knuckles. But I haven't stopped thinking about you for a single second since we met. Her defenses began to crumble. The vulnerability in his eyes, the gentle touch of his lips on her skin, the unguarded sincerity in his words. All of it worked together to dismantle her heart's walls. I can't forget you either, she admitted softly. A radiant smile broke across Lucas's face, like sunlight in the middle of a storm. So, does that mean you'll give me a chance? He brushed his fingertips over the back of her hand. A chance? For what? To prove to you that some men are worth the risk, to show you that what I feel for you is real. He placed her hand over his chest, right above his heart. Emma could feel its fast, strong beat and understood that he too was nervous, that he too was taking a leap. All right, she whispered. Lucas's eyes lit up as if he had just been given the most precious gift of his life. The night didn't end at the restaurant. Lucas suggested a walk along the Seine. They strolled slowly, listening to the gentle slap of water, pausing now and then to admire the golden light spilling over the river. In the days that followed, Lucas began appearing more often in Emma's schedule. One rainy morning, he brought hot coffee to the library, along with a lemon macaron. One afternoon, he surprised her with a picnic in the Jardin du Luxembourg, spreading a checkered blanket, uncorking white wine, and listening to the rustle of leaves above. With each meeting, they shared a little more of themselves. Emma spoke of her sister Claire and life back in Sydney. Lucas spoke of work trips to Italy and Spain, where he found inspiration to preserve old buildings. Between them, a rhythm was forming, not rushed, not loud, but enough for them both to realize. This was more than a chance encounter. On Wednesday morning, Emma discovered that Lucas remembered exactly how she liked her coffee. A hint of cinnamon and 2 cubes of brown sugar. How did you know? She asked. Because I pay attention to everything that makes you happy, he smiled. That afternoon, while she was carefully transcribing a complex French sonnet, Lucas appeared behind her. Don't you have a company to run? She teased. I am running it, just from here, where I happen to have a much better view. Emma swiveled her chair to face him as he leaned in close. "You're distracting me." "That's the idea," he replied, pulling her gently to her feet. "You need a break, and I want to show you something." 20 minutes later, they were strolling through the Jardin du Luxembourg. Lucas carried a blanket and a picnic basket filled with fresh fruit, cheeses, and sparkling water. "Do you always come this prepared?" "Only since I met a woman who forgets to eat," he said, handing her a strawberry. She bit into it, juice running down her chin. Without hesitation, he reached out and brushed the drop away with his finger. "You?" he began, then stopped. "What about me?" "Beautiful," he said hoarsely. "You're truly beautiful." The air between them tightened with electricity. Lucas began leaning in slowly, but just then, a ball bounced straight into the picnic basket, sending strawberries rolling everywhere. "Sorry, mister," a young boy ran over. Lucas laughed, returning the ball before calmly tidying up without the slightest annoyance. "You're good with kids." "I like kids. They're honest. Unlike adults." And me? "You're the most honest person I've ever met," he said, taking her hand. "I can't hide anything from you, and I've spent many years hiding my real self." "So, who is the real you?" "A man who's starting to believe that sometimes it's worth taking risks, if they might lead to happiness." That evening, as they walked back to the car, Lucas held her hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why me? I'm sure you have plenty of women lining up for a date." Leaning against the car, Lucas pulled her close until their faces were only inches apart. "Because when you look at a manuscript, your eyes light up like you've just found buried treasure. Because when you talk about your work, the passion is so pure it makes me remember what it feels like to love something with all your heart. Because when you smile, it's like the first sunlight after a long, unending winter. So warm it makes you forget the cold ever existed. And because," he moved closer until their foreheads touched, "you're the first person in 20 years who's made me want to lower every defense I have." Emma knew she was falling into something deep and beautiful that could change her life. And for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of the fall. On a sweltering Saturday afternoon, she decided to wander through the narrow streets of the Latin Quarter, browsing the old bookshops. She had plans to meet Lucas for dinner later, but with a few hours to spare, she couldn't resist the lure of rare and dusty volumes. She was admiring a first edition of Victor Hugo when her phone rang. It was Claire, her older sister, calling from Sydney, her voice tense. "I'm worried about you," Claire said bluntly. "Dad told me you're seeing a businessman in Paris." Emma froze. "Dad said that?" "Emma, please be careful. Don't give your whole heart before you're sure he's willing to do the same." Claire reminded her of what happened 5 years ago, when her wealthy fiancé had abandoned her the night before their wedding because his family disapproved. Her words slipped into Emma's mind like a needle, stitching doubts she hadn't felt before. That evening, when Lucas came to pick her up, he noticed the change in her instantly. Throughout dinner in a cozy left-bank bistro, Emma's answers were short, her mind clearly elsewhere. "What's wrong?" he asked, taking her hand. "Are your parents still alive?" she asked. "My father is. Why?" "Does he know you're dating me?" Lucas hesitated before admitting, "We don't really discuss my personal life." "Or is it because you know he wouldn't approve of an Australian translator?" Emma said, pulling her hand back. A flash of anger lit in Lucas's eyes. "Where is this coming from?" "From reality. We're from two different worlds." He tried to explain that it didn't matter, but Emma only felt the distance widening. She stood. "Maybe we should remember who we really are before this goes too far." Out on the street, Lucas pleaded, "Emma, don't run away because you're scared." She looked at him, eyes shimmering. "Sometimes running away because you're scared is the smartest thing you can do." She took a taxi, leaving him alone on the sidewalk with a broken heart. In the days that followed, Emma buried herself in work, determined not to think about him. On Thursday morning, Dr. Ramirez stopped by her desk, speaking gently. "You know, Mr. Moreau has called 3 times to ask if you're all right. A man who doesn't truly care wouldn't do that." Emma felt her resolve begin to waver. In the days after their breakup, Emma tried to throw herself into work, but each time she looked out the library window, she remembered Lucas's eyes during their argument, full of pain and helplessness. She turned off her phone, ignored emails, and told herself she had made the right decision. Lucas, however, didn't give up. He called, left messages, sent letters, all unanswered. He even showed up at the library, but Emma claimed she was in meetings to avoid him. One rainy afternoon, as Emma stepped out of the library, a familiar voice called from behind. "Miss Carter, may I steal a few minutes of your time?" She turned. It wasn't Lucas, but Thomas Moreau, his younger brother. He wore a dark blue wool coat, his brown eyes usually playful, but today unusually serious. "I don't think we've officially met," Thomas said, "but I wanted to show you something." He handed her a paper bag. Inside were several research books on classical French literature, along with a thick notebook filled with handwritten notes. The careful script, sometimes with spelling mistakes, was Lucas's. He had underlined passages, scribbled meanings, and even tried translating a few lines. "He started this after meeting you," Thomas said slowly. "Lucas isn't someone who opens up easily, but he wanted to understand your world, even just a small part of it." Emma held the notebook, turning its pages. Warmth spread through her chest. She could picture Lucas bent over the pages, brow furrowed as he looked things up, and tears blurred her vision. Thomas gave a small smile. "He won't tell you because he thinks it's nothing, but I thought you should know." That evening, Emma stood at the door of Lucas's apartment in the 7th arrondissement. When it opened, Lucas appeared, his eyes widening in surprise at the sight of her. "Emma," she held up the notebook, "how long were you planning to keep this from me?" Lucas glanced at it, then back at her. "It's just curiosity." "No," Emma shook her head, her voice catching. "It's proof you've been trying to step into my world. And I didn't give you the chance." He was silent for a few seconds, then stepped closer. "I was afraid if I told you, you'd think it was just trying to win you over." "Maybe at first I would have," she said, smiling faintly through her tears. "But now I know. It's real." Lucas's hand brushed lightly against her cheek, his gaze softening. "I never wanted to give up on us, Emma." Her reply was steady. "Then don't." The space between them vanished in a tight embrace, not just to erase the misunderstanding, but as a silent promise that they would keep moving forward together, no matter how many challenges lay ahead. A few weeks after their reconciliation, bad news struck. Thomas Moreau had been in a car accident in Lyon on his way home from work. Lucas received the call close to midnight. His voice, usually steady, trembled noticeably. "I have to go now," Lucas said, tossing a few things into a suitcase. "Thomas is in surgery." Emma didn't hesitate. "I'm coming with you." The night train to Lyon was so quiet that the grinding of the wheels on the rails seemed to echo inside her chest. Lucas sat by the window, staring into the darkness outside, his hand clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. Emma simply placed her hand over his, saying nothing. The hospital lights glowed against the pale gray sky. They found their way to the recovery unit, where Mr. Moreau, Lucas's father, stood tall, his face stern but his eyes shadowed with fatigue. He looked at Emma with a flicker of hesitation. "And this young woman is?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Lucas replied without pause. "The woman I love." Mr. Moreau's gaze swept over Emma slowly, as if weighing something. He said nothing more, only gave a short nod before turning away. In the days that followed, Emma stayed at the hospital with Lucas. She brought morning coffee, took notes from the doctors, and helped coordinate with Thomas's friends and colleagues. At night, when Lucas dozed off in the chair, she pulled his coat over him. Once, Mr. Moreau stood in the doorway, silently watching. He didn't speak, but when Emma met his eyes, the coldness from before had softened, even just a little. A week later, Thomas woke up. His voice was weak, but still managed to joke. "Big brother, don't look at me like I'm about to read my will." Lucas laughed, and Emma exhaled in relief. Before leaving Lyon, Mr. Moreau called Emma into the hallway. "Thank you for being here with us," he said simply. But to Emma, it was a significant step forward. On the train back to Paris, Lucas held her hand the entire way, without needing to say a word. Between them, there was an unspoken understanding. This trial hadn't pulled them apart. It had only made their bond stronger. A month after Thomas was discharged, Emma and Lucas's life slowly returned to its normal rhythm. But that evening, Lucas sent Emma a brief message. "I'll pick you up at 8. Bring a little curiosity." Emma barely had time to ask where, before his reply came, "Secret." At exactly 8 p.m., Lucas appeared at her door in a long coat, his smile hinting at something hard to guess. He took her to the Bibliothèque Nationale de France where she worked, but things were different tonight. The main doors were closed, with only warm light spilling from inside. "I borrowed the keys from the director," Lucas explained as they stepped in. "I wanted to give you something." The hallway was silent. Soft light stretched across the glass cases, holding ancient manuscripts. There were no other footsteps but theirs. Emma stood in the main hall, looking around, feeling as if she owned the entire place. "You've always said you wanted to be alone with these books," Lucas said. "So, they're yours. At least for tonight." Emma smiled, her heart fluttering. They moved slowly from case to case. Lucas stopped in front of a 16th century manuscript, asking her about the meaning of the lines. Emma spoke passionately, her eyes lighting up each time she explained something she loved. When they reached the Ronsard manuscript, Lucas turned to her, his gaze deeper than usual. "Emma, I know our worlds are different, but here among these words, I feel like we speak the same language." She opened her mouth to respond, but Lucas gently took her hand, pulling her closer. "I love you, not for what you do, but for who you are." Under the soft golden light, in a silence broken only by the sound of their hearts, they shared a deep kiss. It carried everything: the patience, the misunderstandings they had overcome, and the belief in the road ahead. The anniversary of their meeting in the sky arrived faster than Emma had expected. That morning, she received a message from Lucas. "Tonight, make no plans. I'll take care of everything." When the doorbell rang, Lucas stood there with his familiar smile, holding a bouquet of white tulips, Emma's favorite. He took her to his apartment in the 7th arrondissement. But when the balcony doors opened, Emma caught her breath. Paris stretched out below them, the Eiffel Tower blazing in the night, its sparkling lights as if celebrating with them. Lucas had set a small table on the balcony, just the two of them, a bottle of champagne, and the chocolate dessert Emma once called her sweet sin. They dined, laughed, and reminisced about the flight. The way Emma had landed in Lucas's lap, the way he pretended to stay calm though his heart had been racing. As dinner drew to a close, Lucas stood, pulling a small box from his jacket pocket. He knelt, his blue-gray eyes fixed on Emma, not just with love, but with the certainty of a man who had found what he would cherish for life. "Emma Carter, you entered my life in a way no one could have predicted, and from that moment, I never wanted to let go. I love you, in the easy days and the hard ones. Will you marry me?" Emma's vision blurred and her breath caught. Every moment they had lived, from the violent jolt that had thrown her into his lap, to the laughter, the arguments, the fragile reconciliations, the long nights in the hospital, flashed through her mind in aching clarity. She realized she had never been so certain of anything. Her lips curved, her voice trembling but firm. "Yes." Lucas slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms. From the kitchen, Thomas emerged with 2 glasses of champagne, his grin wide as if this was the moment he'd been waiting for all year. The three of them clinked glasses, their laughter mingling with the chime of the Eiffel Tower's hourly lights. Later that night, when Paris was quiet, Emma and Lucas stood on the balcony, their fingers intertwined. "I think," Emma whispered, "that turbulence was the most unexpected gift life ever gave me." Lucas smiled, pressing a soft kiss to her hair. "And I thank the sky for dropping you into my life." Under the city's golden glow, they knew that whatever strong winds might lie ahead, they would face them together, because that fateful fall had found a place to anchor forever.